mainly meant for target audiences. And these target audiences for some of the major ANI services that I'll be talking about are scholarly communities. So the abstracting and indexing services are online searchable collections of information, and they cover different types of documents, such as journals, books, book series, conference proceedings, etc. Most of the ANI services, their focus is on journals. However, there are many who also focus on book and conference proceeding indexing. But focus of this presentation is going to be journal indexing. So in order to make this ANI services very powerful, what happens is that, as I said, it is either based on specific subject areas, for example, PubMed or astrophysics data system, or they are multidisciplinary like Web of Science and Scopus. And in order to make it relevant, precise, lot of behind the scene work goes in developing and curating them. So what is the value of ANI services? So the relationship between the content owner, which is publishers, authors, remember, authors are creating, they are the content creator. And by getting it published, publisher comes into the picture, and the database creator or the ANI services creator are compiling most relevant information for their databases. So that's how the relationship starts. And ANI services provide very discipline specific comprehensive coverage. So for example, the world globally, scholarly communities think that everything that is biomed related is in PubMed. Because that is supposed to be the most comprehensive platform to look for biomedical content. So it is very critical for the content creator and content owner to ensure that our content is going to the appropriate ANI services for it to be discovered by the right audience. And that's the value of ANI services. Also, the ongoing selection and curation that takes place by the content distributor or ANI services, they make sure that the content that they are selecting for their databases, ANI services, and I will use databases and ANI services interchangeably. So ANI services, it is meant for, as I say, target audiences. So they have subject matter experts in developing, curating, and maintaining these services. So this is the value of ANI services. At Springer-Nature, we have this ANI team that is completely focused on making sure that the Springer-Nature content is distributed globally to the most appropriate ANI services. This is the team at Springer-Nature. This is my team. I'm head of abstracting and indexing, and I have 3 colleagues who directly report into me. And there are some teams within Springer-Nature. They are not directly reporting into me. However, they work with me to make our this endeavor or initiative very successful. So this is my team based, we are all based, most of us are based in New York. I have one person, Sophie, who's based in London. So what's unique about, you must be thinking, what's such a big deal about this ANI at Springer-Nature? So as I explained, in 21st century, the ANI process is completely automated. In order to make it most relevant and retrievable, there are certain international guidelines and standards provided in creating the data. And the backbone of this principle is known as fair data principle. So the content, the metadata that we create in data file, it needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So this is the premise. I love this graphic, and the reason is, although it is focusing, and this is from Scholarly Kitchen, there is this scholarly community platform where blogs are posted on a daily basis and important issues are discovered or rather discussed. This is one of the blog posts that was posted, and I love this graphic because it very nicely portrays the work that is involved in entire ANI process as well as discovery process. So you can see this is like, a high maintenance job mainly. So in order to get the content discovered and used, there are so many components that have to be aligned and work properly. If anything fails, the usage is going to get affected because the content is not going to reach to the right audience. And of course, starting with manuscript submission to a peer review tracker, there are so many other components, including ANI services, that play an important role. So the main part here that ANI is involved in at a higher level is providing content. So the content, once it is selected by the ANI services, we have to ensure that the content is seamlessly delivered to those databases that have selected our content. And of course, there are so many nuances to the indexing process. So the ANI team is also actively involved in making sure that the appropriate indexing is done. And this is an ongoing thing. And ANI services at Springer-Nature is recently playing an active role in working with the ranking services also. UGC is one of the prime examples, but there are so many other ranking services throughout the world that are important for specific countries. So we partner with those ranking services to make sure that our journals are included and displayed in those ranking services. Okay, the uniqueness about Springer-Nature's ANI services. So as I have been saying, number one priority is to make sure that our content is distributed most comprehensively. So we partner at least with 200 ANI services. This includes the discovery services, as well as subject-specific abstracting and indexing services. And this partnership is evaluated on an ongoing basis. So the ANI team gets requests from publishers, from external audiences such as authors, editor-in-chief, editorial board members, faculty. They make suggestion that why Springer-Nature is not partnering with a specific service. So we have to explore what are the possibilities. Is this really a very authoritative and reliable service? Because Springer-Nature being one of the leading publishers, we do not want to partner with a service that has a lot of predatory journals. So the reputation of Springer-Nature is at stake. So the ANI service with other teams within Springer-Nature ensures that our partnership is with reliable and authoritative services. Then the ANI team at Springer-Nature also works with publishing teams and EICs, editor-in-chief, to make sure that their titles, their journals are prepared or ready for specific ANI services. As you are aware, not everything is selected by Scopus or by Web of Science or by PubMed databases. They have their own requirement, and we are going to go in detail about those requirements. But ANI team at Springer-Nature makes sure that we are keeping track of the changing requirements by these ANI services, and journals, titles published by Springer-Nature are ready for acceptance. The ANI team also helps with the application process. So as I said, there are checklists and there are requirements, and we keep track of what are the changing requirements. And each year, each quarter, maybe there are changes that are taking place. So we keep track of all the changes. Then this is, the initial stage. once the title gets accepted, the job doesn't end there. Then the real job starts, and that is, providing seamless data. And I already kind of touched upon the background that the data has to meet certain technical level, and each service has its own technical requirement. So we make sure that our content is meeting the requirement that Web of Science is asking or PubMed is asking for. And again, they keep on changing their requirement based on the changes that are introduced by all these international agencies. The ANI team at Springer-Nature also keeps track of missing content. And this is very critical for everybody to understand, because even if the title gets selected by an ANI service, if due to whatever reasons, if the content is missing, if that ANI service did not index the content, it means the content is not going to get discovered, and therefore it cannot get cited. So the ANI team at Springer-Nature proactively make sure that the missing content is covered. So we have a dedicated team who keeps track of the missing content and then reports to each service that this data is missing, so make sure that you index it. And then all these ANI services, we have to have ongoing communication, because I said, they have all this changing requirement. We want to be appraised of all these changes that are taking places on an ongoing basis, so we are not surprised. So there is meetings, monthly meetings, and in some cases we interact with these services on a daily basis. So with the technical team at PubMed or at Scopus or at Web of Science, there are ongoing communications taking place every day, and that's one of the major part of ANI services. An ANI service also prepares different reports and deliverables for the teams. Mainly, this is for internal publishing teams. However, these reports are also shared with external EICs and editorial board members. And these are the reports to kind of, check the journal readiness. So we prepare what is known as preliminary impact factor report to determine if a journal is ready for an impact factor database or not. We also do comparative analysis with other competitor journals. And there could be multiple reasons why we do this, but that's something we work closely with the teams and EIC to prepare all these reports, so they have latest information at their fingertips to really improve the journals. Okay, so now we are ready for the first poll. And Alpana, I would request you to carry this first poll out.
Yeah, sure, Sonal. Just allow me a moment.
Sure.
Yes, so on the screens, you can see the poll running. I hope, Sonal, you're also able to see that.
Yes, I see it. And
so I request the attendees to please vote for the question that's being asked. And if by any chance you're not able to vote for this and you're not able to see this polling window, which we are seeing a blue color window, sometimes it gets at the back. So please minimize the main screen of Sonal's presentation. Sometimes the polling window gets at the back, and that's how you can vote. So the question, I think Sonal, you can throw some light on this question, though it's very self-explanatory.
So thank you, Alpana. As I discussed that, Springer-Nature's ANI team interacts with 200 plus ANI services. However, there are some very important ANI services that all authors, regardless of the experience or level, are interested in getting their content included in those services. And I would like to find out from your perspective, what do you think? What are the three most important ANI services? And of course, there is no room for me here to provide the entire list of 200 ANI services. But some of the one that I was not able to include in this are, for example, EconLit or astrophysics data system or mathematical reviews that are very subject specific, nonetheless important and valuable.
So you have the results here, Sonal. I think you can see them.
Okay, hold on. And how do I see the result?
So if you're not able to see this window, just minimize it. Minimize your presentation. It will be at the back. Or I can tell you, people have voted 78% for Scopus,
Okay,
68% Web of Science, and the third is Google Scholar, 55% votes.
excellent. Great to know. Very important. Okay. So that's very interesting that this audience thinks that Scopus is the most important, and rightly so. And we'll go into the details. So thank you, Alpana. And I think it may be better for you to give me the results so that I don't have to keep back and forth with the slide presentation. So
Sure, I'll do
moving
that.
on. Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on to the next slide. So this is a very high level view of the journal development life cycle for the indexing process. Okay, this is purely for the indexing process. So in the first year, and this is again from the journal perspective, however, it is very important for all authors to understand how the indexing takes place. So if you are publishing your content with a journal that is comparatively new, it is not going to be necessarily indexed in some of the well-known ANI services, because usually they take time in making sure that the journal has consistently published for certain number of years. So here what you are seeing is in the first year, again, I'm going to say because of the reputation of Springer-Nature, we have partnership with many of the ANI services and discovery services where everything that is published by Springer-Nature automatically goes into those services. Some of them are EBSCO Discovery Service, Google Scholar, OCLC WorldCat, ProQuest, Primo, and Summons. These are again discovery services. Everything published by Springer-Nature automatically goes into these services. So there is already the platform provided to the content, regardless of how long that journal has been publishing. It could be, 6 months, or it could be a year, but we provide our content and they are discoverable through this discovery services. For open access journals, and as you know, Springer-Nature has a big portfolio. It is one of the largest publisher of open access content. DOAJ is a database which is considered very important for open access content. So all our content also goes, of course, they have a selection process. So it doesn't automatically get included in DOAJ. We have to apply our journals and they have to go through the evaluation process and get selected. Then there are certain subject specific services such as astrophysics database, chemistry abstract service, which is part of American Chemical Society, ZB Math. These services, again, they make the selection of the content based on the newsletter that Springer-Nature ANI team distributes to all our partners, abstracting and indexing services partners, that these are the journals we will be launching next year. These are the journals we have taken over from other publishers. These are the journals that have gone to other publishers. So all ANI services are kept informed about these changes. And based on that newsletter, they make their selection in advance for some content that is going to be published in the coming year. In the second year, so that was for the first year. In the second year, some of the journals will be ready for some of the databases. Now, COPE registration has become very critical, but COPE requires at least 1 year of the publication history. So the content doesn't automatically get the stamp of COPE. It has to wait, the journal has to wait for a year, then apply, and then it gets selected. The other service, very important service, is Emerging Sources Citation Index, which is part of Web of Science. That's part of Clarivate Analytics. Now, Emerging Sources Citation Index is the launching database that they have introduced in 2015. This database doesn't give impact factor to their journals. However, the content is indexed and it is discoverable through the same platform where the impact factor databases are also offered, and that is Web of Science platform. That's why it is very critical for the content to get included in this Emerging Sources Citation Index. And usually they are asking the journals to be publishing at least 20 articles per year. And after 1 year, the journal or the title will be eligible for Emerging Sources Citation Index. And PubMed Central. PubMed Central is a database that is offered by the National Library of Medicine. The focus of this database is medicine, biomedicine, and healthcare related information. PubMed Central's premise is that this database must offer free full text content. So not all journals or content will qualify for PubMed Central because it has to be free full text. So there are certain business decisions made, and not all journals will apply for PubMed Central. So as an author, it is very critical for you to understand, and on the journal page on Springer Nature website, you will see the list of ANI services in which the journal is indexed. So if your goal is to get your content discovered through PubMed, you will have to make sure that the journal is part of that database. It has been selected for that database. This is something as an author you should keep in mind. Okay, moving on to the third year. By third year, there are some of the very critical databases, reputable databases, authoritative databases that will consider the content or journal eligible for their database. However, it doesn't automatically get included in these databases. So the audience poll indicated that the most important database from their perspective is Scopus. One of the basic requirements of Scopus is that the journal must be publishing at least for 2 years, because they give a lot of emphasis on the publication history. So if your journal hasn't been publishing for 2 years, it is not going to get selected for Scopus unless it has excellent reputation like Nature branded journals. Nature branded journals many times get selected in the first year itself, but those are exceptions. For majority of the journals, it has to wait for 2 years in order to get selected for Scopus evaluation. EI Compendex is an engineering database that is also offered by Elsevier, and they have similar requirements like Scopus, and all journals must wait for 2 years. GeoBase is also offered. It's part of this whole group of database, so they have similar requirements. Medline Science Citation Index Expanded and Social Science Citation Index, these are the databases. They value the publication history, and there are so many more requirements that we will go through shortly. So this is the overall picture of how the indexing process takes place at Springer Nature. Okay, so what are the important questions that the ANI, that the publishers, societies, EIC should be asking from ANI services? So number one, make sure that you are selecting the database, of course, with the partnership of the ANI services at Springer Nature regarding the relevancy. Because if you are not publishing content in astrophysics, there is no point in applying to astrophysics database system, because then it is not going to be relevant. So number one question is always how relevant this ANI service is to my content. Then the next question is the reputation. So again, I'm going to emphasize that Springer Nature doesn't partner with a service that doesn't have a good reputation, mainly because we do not want to align or partner with a service that also indexes a lot of predatory content. Inclusion. The next question is, what are the requirements? As I said, and we will discuss very briefly, each database has its own requirement, and without meeting those requirements, they are not going to consider selecting our content. And the last question is submission. So how do we provide the content once it is selected? And that entire submission process is being handled by the ANI team. So as an author, as EIC, or as the publishing team, you do not have to worry about that component. Okay. From ANI services perspective, so if I'm at Scopus, a reviewer at Scopus or at Web of Science, what am I going to be considering? So number one question I'm going to ask is that, what is the need? Why should I add one more title in an area which already has 300 other titles? So the need is going to be very important. The next question is going to be about aims and scope. So in order to make the reviewer or the service understand the value of what we are providing, we have to make sure that our aims and scope is unique. It must stand out. So the ANI services can think, okay, this journal is a unique, although we have 25 other journals publishing in the similar niche area. However, this journal is offering something unique that no other journal is offering. That's why it gets high priority. Then the ANI service is also going to be doing the comparative analysis. And that comparative analysis is going to be, where does the journal stand in comparison of other journals that are already in the database? And that's where we do this predictive impact factor report that's specifically for the impact factor databases to determine the journal readiness. Because the reviewer at Clarivate Analytics for Web of Science product, impact factor product, they are going to be doing the same. Then the ANI service is going to be looking at the regional or international focus. So if you have positioned your journal as an international journal, you have to make sure that it is getting reflected, starting with aims and scope, editorial board member, authors, as well as readers. This doesn't mean that the regional content is not included in the databases, but you have to be absolutely sure how you are presenting your title. So if it is regional, you have to make it clear that it is regional. They do not like kind of conflict. It needs to be better aligned. So editorial board member and authorship representation for the journals are also extremely critical, because majority of the leading databases are global, Scopus and Web of Science. So they are looking for international representation. So it's critical for the journals to make sure that you have international representation. Okay, the basic requirements for all major ANI services are these. The journal must have an ISSN number. Each article, because it is electronic data delivery, now there is no longer the print copies being distributed to the ANI services. It becomes extremely critical that each content has unique DOI. The journal should have a unique title. The reputation of the publisher also makes a big difference. So journal publisher like Springer-Nature, it definitely makes a difference. Publishing schedule. So they want to make sure that the publishing schedule is strictly executed. So if the journal is saying that it is a monthly journal, they are going to be looking that the journal is publishing on a monthly basis. Then they are also going to be looking at the journal website. How, so far as the navigation is concerned, the information is concerned, all that will be kind of analyzed by the indexing services. Peer review policy ethics statements are extremely important. So, the journal should offer under instructions for authors, very clear peer review policy, an ethical statement, and leading ANI services will make sure that this is being implemented at an article level also. Aims and scope, I already touched upon. Aims and scope is very important right from the inception of the journal throughout the life cycle development, because aims and scope is one of the major considerations for selecting the journal in important ANI services. Then article titles and abstracts should be in English. Of course, there are many ANI services that select foreign language content also, but they want to see that the list of references, article titles, and abstracts are in English. They pay closer attention to editorial board, the reputation of EIC, who are the editorial board, is the editorial board international in scope, especially for internationally positioned journals. It's very critical. They also check whether the journal is doing the plagiarism detection. Language substantive editing is very critical. Springer-Nature offers that as a value-added service to authors, especially those authors that are coming from the countries where English is not the native language. Because these are majority of these databases that we are talking about are in English. They are indexing content in English. That's why the language becomes, what is the flow of the language within the manuscript article, that become pretty critical and important. The next point is content delivery. So I already touched upon it. PubMed is going to ask for the content to be delivered in JATS format. So we have to make sure that, yeah, our content is in JATS format, so it can automatically get loaded on PubMed. And the publication model. Now that is going to be specific to some of the ANI services. So the basic requirement for DOAG or PMC is that the journal or the content must be free full text, because that's the premise, or that's the goal of that database. So if you have subscription based content, they are not going to get included in those types of databases. Okay, this is the coverage of ANI, and again, I haven't included all 200 ANI services, but the coverage is comprehensive. We have 78% of our content included in different products of Web of Science core collection. That includes the flagship databases, impact factor databases, and ESCI. PubMed, we have 38% of journal, because PubMed, as you know, is very specific to biomedicine, medicine, healthcare related content. And our 3,000 journals, not all of them are publishing in those areas. So it is limited number of journals. Scopus, we have very good success rate with Scopus. 83% of our journals are included in Scopus, and rest are not included because they are not meeting the core requirement of publishing for more than 2 years. So this is kind of to give you an idea as to, what is the coverage. Again, in all 200 ANI services that we partner with, we have very comprehensive coverage. Okay. Now we are going to be talking about Web of Science, and it is time for us to take the second poll. And Alpana, if you could please help with the second poll.
Sure, Sonal. So it is on the screen right now.
Yeah, and the question is, all journals included in Web of Science get an impact factor, yes or no? I kind of already gave you the hint in the initial slide. So this should be, the answer should be 100% accurate if possible. And the responses?
Yeah, I'll just wait for another 3 or so seconds.
Okay.
For those of you who are not able to vote, as I mentioned, please just minimize the main window, and then you can see this polling window. Sometimes there is some issue with the polling screen. Okay, Sonal, so I'm closing it now, and I will not. Yeah, I'm sharing it. If you're not able to see, I see 57% people say yes and 43% say no.
Okay, so the answer is no. Not everything that is submitted to Web of Science or selected by Web of Science automatically get an impact factor. And I will go through, the requirement and the recent changes. So please note, not everything that gets selected for Web of Science automatically get an impact factor. In fact, majority of them may not get an impact factor. Okay, before we go into the requirement for Web of Science, including flagship databases, I'm going to be discussing about this particular difference because Alpana had brought this question up. I think somebody had asked as to what is the difference of Science Citation Index and Science Citation Index Expanded. So there is no longer Science Citation Index. It used to be there many years back, and the reason it used to be there because at that time Clarivate Analytics, which was this Web of Science, was part of Thomson Reuters, and prior to that ISI, they used to distribute the CD-ROMs to libraries because of the internet wasn't available, popular. This is prior to 1990s. So they used to distribute the CD-ROM, and because of the limitations of that format, they were able to select only top content for Science Citation Index. They had given that name of Science Citation Index to the CD-ROM format. No longer they are distributing CD-ROM or diskettes to libraries or their subscribers. Now it is only Science Citation Index Expanded. So the content that is evaluated is always evaluated for Science Citation Index Expanded. So if any author thinks why his or her content is not in Science Citation Index, the reason is that product no longer exists. I thought it was important to kind of, talk about this difference. Okay, so this is the process at Web of Science. And actually the next slide is going to be talking more in detail. But as you can see, Emerging Sources Citation Index, which is their basic database, that database will select content or journals or articles. Usually the selection is done at a journal level, and then everything published within that journal gets selected for that particular database. Emerging Sources Citation Index will select journals, but they will not give an impact factor to those journals. But the content is going to get indexed in Web of Science, and the content will be discovered through the same platform, Web of Science. However, the journals are not going to get an impact factor. For a journal to get an impact factor, it should either be promoted to Science Citation Index Expanded or Social Sciences Citation Index or Arts and Humanities Citation Index. Now, Arts and Humanities Citation Index doesn't give an impact factor. There are only two databases that give impact factor, that's Science Citation Index Expanded and Social Science Citation Index. Okay, so this slide is extremely important. And the reason it is extremely important because last year, Clarivate Analytics, Web of Science, they revised the requirement for the content. So what you are seeing, column number 1, 2, and 3, these are the requirements that all journals must meet if the journal wants to get selected for Web of Science. And column number 1, initial triage, editorial triage, and editorial evaluation. These are the requirements that are needed for the journal to get selected for Emerging Sources Citation Index. Once the content gets selected for Emerging Sources Citation Index, then in order to get an impact factor, that journal must have certain threshold of citation activity. And the last column, impact criteria, the 4 requirements are being considered for a journal if it wants to get promoted from emerging sources citation index to the impact factor databases. And one of the main one is comparative citation analysis, which means that the journal must be in Q1 or Q2 of the subject category. That means it should be in the top 50 percentile of the subject category. Only then it is going to be considered for an impact factor databases. So ANI team at Springer-Nature continuously prepares the predictive impact factor report to determine the journal readiness. Now, according to Clarivate, many of the journals will never ever go into the impact factor databases, because if they do not meet the threshold of being the citation activity taking place in top 50 percentile, those journals might never be considered for the impact factor databases. So the previous notions prior to last year, prior to 2019, was that if a journal is in Web of Science for 2 years, it automatically gets an impact factor. That is not the case anymore. And I want everybody to pay attention to that point. So what Clarivate is doing, these are the new requirements they introduced last year. And based on those requirements, they are continuously evaluating the journals that they have selected. So similar to better performing journals that are in ESCI that can get selected for the impact factor databases, similarly, low performing journals that are already getting an impact factor could be considered moving or getting demoted and losing the impact factor, so they can create more room for better performing journals. Okay, so this was also one of the questions that came. Alpana shared that question with me. So I have this information. When does the journal move from ESCI to the impact factor databases? So this is what you need to pay attention to, that as I said, the journal must be in top 50 percentile of the subject category in order to get selected or considered for the impact factor databases. That's number one priority. Then the other things are also going to be author and editorial board citation analysis. What is the reputation of the EIC editorial board members, and what is the significance of the citation activity for the authors that are publishing in that journal, and content significance. So many times they will select a journal that just they are a little bit flexible with the requirement for those journals that are publishing on a brand new topic. So say for example, when 3D printing was introduced, they did select some journals that were publishing less than 2 years or that did not have great citation activity. And the reason is because it was a brand new topic and they wanted to develop that area. So they were a little bit flexible with the requirements. Okay, we are running short of time, so I'm going to quickly go through this slides, and you can ask questions during the Q&A session. So that way we can make sure that I answered all your concerns and questions. So this is an example of the comparative citation analysis that the ANI team at Springer-Nature provides. So as you can see, the left-hand side, journal A, within the first year, the journal got selected. And this is one of the Nature branded journals. In the first year itself, the citation activity was so great that the journal was placed in Q1, quartile 1 of the subject category. That means the journal was performing in the top 25% of the subject category. So it got selected. It did not have to wait for 2 years. It got selected in the first year itself. Whereas journal B that you are seeing on right hand side, that journal has been publishing for quite some time. However, it is not yet selected for impact factor database because that journal is still in fourth quartile, bottom of the fourth quartile. It is one of the, I think it is the last one in that subject category. And therefore, until this journal B moves into Q1 or Q2, it is not going to get an impact factor. Okay. So self-citation, again, I'm not going to, we have to cover, Scopus and PubMed also. So I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on self-citation. If you have any questions, please let me know through Alpana. But self-citation is very, very important. And in 2020, Clarivate again changed their requirement and guidelines for self-citation. And now some of the journals that had the self-citation rate of 25%, which wasn't a big deal until 2019, got suppressed. So this tool that you are seeing in front of your screen, this is developed by the A9 team, one of the teams within Springer Nature, and we monitor the self-citation rate on a monthly basis and on an annual basis for journals. And then we do the comparative analysis within the subject category and share this information with the teams so they have a better understanding of how to control the self-citation rate, because you don't want your journal to get suppressed. So these are all the value-added services that we provide. Okay, now we are going to be talking about Scopus. EI Compendex is very similar to Scopus, so I'm not going to go into EI Compendex because we are running short of time. So now it is the time for the third poll, and the poll is, do all journals that are included in Scopus get a site score? So Alpana, do you want to carry this poll out?
Yeah, so it's already running on their screens and I am receiving few votes. Let's see, I'll just share the results in a while with you. And thank you, Sonal, for taking those questions. Thank you, really.
No problem.
Okay, so I closed this, and from the results that I have, Sonal, it says 55% say yes to it, and 45% say no.
Okay, so the answer is yes. If a title gets selected for Scopus, it will definitely get a site score. So it is different than Web of Science, where they have the difference in Web of Science that only certain journals get an impact factor. That's not the case with Scopus. In Scopus, if a title is getting selected, it will definitely get a site score, which is kind of head-to-head competition now with impact factor. So let's talk about Scopus. So Scopus is, yes, the audience already indicated that Scopus is one of the most important databases for them. And I agree that Scopus is getting good, coverage, importance, significance. And as you can see, it is covering 40 different languages. It is updated daily. And it is one of the leading, the most important database globally. And it is a lot bigger than Web of Science. So the coverage is huge. So this is, based on the last year statistic. You can see, and I will share this slide with the audience. And this is from Scopus. So this is not created by me. This is created by Scopus. And they provide kind of the breakdown by subject area and their acceptance and rejection rate. Similarly, they have, the breakdown by countries and review title per publisher. For Springer, unfortunately, they've broken it down by the imprint. So you do not get, overall idea, because we have multiple, so many imprints. We have Springer International, Springer, Biomed Central, Nature. So it kind of gets broken down, but I already indicated in my previous slide that 84% of Springer Nature content is getting included in Scopus. So we are quickly going to go through the requirement. The most basic requirement for Scopus that the content must be peer reviewed. The abstract and title should be in English. It should be a regular publication. So if you say your journal is a monthly, it must be publishing on a monthly basis. If it says it is a quarterly, it should be publishing on a quarterly basis. They do not like to see gaps. Then they want Roman script references. So what does Roman script references mean? This slide shows what doesn't meet the requirement or criteria and what meets the criteria. So, the list of references should be the way it is displayed on the right-hand side. And the ethics statement is also very critical. We already covered that as the basic requirement. So these are more in detail. They want, journal policy, again, peer review policy, editorial statement, international diversity, geographic diversity. They want to see that because it is a global database. They will pay attention to the quality of content. What is the journal standing? So they will also see how often the journal has been cited even before they select, and there are ways of doing it. And we keep track of the citation activity for journal even before it gets selected for an ANI services. None of the leading ANI services like to see any gaps in the publication. So if you have a huge gap, it will create a problem. And of course, they want to see the online availability of the content. So as of this year, they have introduced 16 requirements. And Scopus now includes, information about advertising, direct marketing, what is the funding source, what is your archiving policy. So they have also kind of, increased the requirement. So these are going to be 16 requirements for Scopus. And of course, some of them are common, but some of them are unique to Scopus. The Scopus title evaluation, as you know, first it goes to the Scopus team, which is the internal employee of Elsevier. Then it goes to the external, they call it CSAB committee. This is the committee of subject matter experts, and they are not employees of Elsevier, and they make independent decision judgment for each title, for rejecting or accepting the content. But this is the whole process of the title evaluation, that what happens, step-by-step process. Okay, going to the next one. Okay, so like Web of Science, as I already touched upon it, that many journals, if they do not perform well, could get demoted in Web of Science. Similarly, Scopus also keeps track of the journals. And if the journal doesn't meet the requirement, continue to meet the requirement, they send the notices or flags. And this is the process of that reevaluation. And these are the criteria they take into consideration for reevaluation. Okay, again, due to lack of time, we are not going to go into detail about EI Compendex, but each one is going to have its own requirement and the journals must meet those requirements. EI Compendex is Engineering Village and focusing on engineering content. Okay, talking about PubMed. So the main thing, now it is the time for us to take the last poll. So I'm going to be asking Alpana to carry the
Yes,
last poll out, which is about all journals publishing in biomedicine, healthcare fields are included in PubMed. What is the answer, yes or no?
yes, the poll is already running, and just allow me some seconds. I will be sharing the results with you. Okay, so 52% say no and 48% say yes.
Okay, so the answer is no. It is the misperception that everything that is, if you go into PubMed, you will find everything that is published in healthcare, biomedicine, medicine, affiliated healthcare subject area discovered through PubMed. That's not the case. In fact, PubMed databases, Medline is one of the most difficult databases to get into. So the answer is no. So what is the difference between PubMed, Medline, and PMC? Medline and PubMed are used interchangeably. So let me quickly go through this. PubMed is the search engine, the platform. It is not a database. You go to PubMed to discover the content. It is a search engine like Google. However, for the content to come into PubMed, it needs to first get selected in one of the databases. This database could be Medline, it could be PubMed Central, it could be NCBI Bookshelf, it could be PubChem. Then the content, once it is selected and indexed in those specific databases, gets discovered through PubMed platform. So, we make sure that we are talking about specific ANI service or product. So Medline, which is one of the leading healthcare database in the world, it is one of the most difficult to get into. The acceptance rate is that of 10%, and it has to go through the evaluation process. Again, they have internal reviewers. They have PubMed has changed their requirement and process, evaluation process also. It is done very systematically. Each journal that is applying for Medline is assigned to reviewers, and they provide independent review decision for each journal, and that's how the journal gets rejected or selected. PubMed Central, I already touched upon that PubMed Central is a digital archive or repository for PubMed, National Library of Medicine. And PubMed Central, the content has to be free, full text, offered to all the users. There is no subscription, it is free, and it is aligned with the NIH public access policy. So if you are an author who is grant funded, and that funding agency is part of NIH or one of the NIH acceptable agency, then it is mandatory for you to include your content in PubMed Central. So the articles can appear in PubMed only if you have published in a journal that is Medline indexed, or your article is published in a journal that is PubMed Central accepted, or your article is grant funded. If your article doesn't meet one of these requirements, it is not going to appear in PubMed. Okay, so PubMed, we don't have time, so I'm not going to go into like individual requirement, but all these slides talk about what is indexed and what is not indexed in PubMed. PubMed Central, I already talked about it. These are the basic requirement of PubMed Central. Medline requirement, again, Medline has very high expectations, and they have very strict requirement, and citation activity has no significance for Medline. For them, the acceptance rejection rate, solicited, unsolicited workflow, those points are more important. Okay, so we are, again, due to lack of time, I cannot discuss each and every requirement. If you have any questions, please follow up with Alpana and I'll provide answers to your questions. But the point here that I would like to make that, Medline and PubMed Central, they have very strict requirements, and at Springer-Nature, we make sure that the journals are meeting those requirements before we submit the application for the higher success rate, because we do not want our journal to get rejected. There is a rejection and reapplication process, but reapplication usually doesn't take place immediately. So even if you challenge the decision of the reviewer, it will happen only at the next evaluation. Medline can also remove a journal if it is not keeping up with their expectations. So NIH funding, I already talked about it. So now let's focus on the last and the most important part, how to increase research impact. So this part of the quote I like the most, that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So please keep, of course, impact factor is considered the golden standard. Things are changing rapidly. So please pay attention not only to one metric, but all different metrics, and take that, keep that into kind of, your mind. So no one metric should be used exclusively. That's the important point, because the citation, the methods that are used by different services vary significantly. So impact factor, for example, is just a mere ratio. So it doesn't give a good information about so many points. that are still very critical for an article. So just don't go by the citations in one of the ANI services. Okay, the research impact cycle, kind of, which we are going to be talking about. These are some of the points. Now, majority of the points you may already be aware of. I'm just kind of, emphasizing. If a particular point is missing, please feel free to share with me. We want to make this interactive, and it is a dialogue. It is not just me speaking, but I would be interested in getting your feedback also. So it has been proven, there are many studies that indicate that publishing more review articles increase the impact factor because review articles are cited more. Focusing on emerging trends, and this is where Springer-Nature's ANI team help the journals team. We help them identify what are the emerging trends within a particular subject category. So even before a new journal is launched, we help the publishing editorial teams in doing the market research and gathering all the data to identify whether that trend is considered popular or hot. We also focus on emerging countries, and there are various analytical tools at our disposal that we use in getting the data. But as an author, as an EIC, these are the points you want to take into consideration. Publish more articles and variety of articles. So there are some points here that are mainly for the publisher and EICs and editorial board members, and then there are some that are for authors. But overall, everybody should be aware of these points. So publishing variety of articles will attract all different levels of target audience within your group, within your subject area. Because as you know, the emerging authors are more interested in writing original studies compared to review articles. So you want to make sure that the journal is offering or reaching to all different levels of audiences. Make sure as an author that you are submitting in a journal that has maximum coverage through abstracting and indexing, which means that that journal is going to get discovered by so many different audiences on so many different platforms. That means the content widely discovered will definitely have a positive impact on the citation accrual. So that's something to keep in mind. Focusing on emerging research and authors, this is more for EIC and for publishing teams that always keep track of who are the emerging researchers and authors writing on that subject area. So you can either, invite them, and if they are key opinion leaders, of course, the citation accrual will also make a difference. Keep track of special thematic issues on current and hot topics. Again, as an author, you want to keep track of ongoing changing trends, emerging trends, and make sure not that, there are so many articles that may not get citations. It doesn't mean that the quality of those articles are not good. It means that, it is not hitting with currently at present with the target audience. So this is something that you need to research before publishing. Okay, avoid descriptive papers. This is conflicting. I have come across a couple of articles or blogs that kind of encourage publishing descriptive papers. However, recently I have seen that they are saying avoid very long papers. It is better to publish smaller papers to get more citations, or keep the audience engaged. So this is debatable point. However, size of the paper does make a difference. Make sure that your paper offers rich data, because as you know, in the current time, the data policy is becoming very critical. There are some databases that offer data exclusively. So including rich data will make a big difference. Publish novel methodologies. So new method always is very attractive. Or if you have, very detailed description in the abstract, and we will be talking about the abstract also from author's perspective. Now in the standardized abstract, they are including the method section also. So within the abstract itself, you are providing that information that will generate more interest amongst the readers, and then that may result in improved citations. Make sure the bibliography, especially in certain subject areas like medicine or computer science, the bibliographies are current, up to date, and comprehensive. Keeping track of missing content, we already touched upon it. We proactively make sure that the content is not missing, because missing content means it is lost opportunity for citation. If the content doesn't get indexed, it is not going to get discovered, read, and cited. So we keep track of it, but as an author, you always want to be on top of the game and make sure that the content that whatever you have written is indexed and it is not missing. Okay, keep the SEO, search engine optimization rules in mind, because as I already explained, everything is computerized, machine readable. So you want to make sure that you are incorporating search engine optimization rules within your title and abstract to get discovered quickly. Citation distribution graph here, the slides, these are part of the report that we prepare. And we prepared this report to help the EIC and the publishing team to identify what types of articles are attracting more citations. It's kind of, to corroborate our logic that review articles are generating more citations. That may not be the case for all journals, but we keep track of, what type of articles are accruing more citations. So from the publisher and the EIC perspective, highly cited researchers, identify them, invite them to contribute for your journal. That will increase the reputation of the journal and recognition and increasing visibility of the journal. So there are various marketing strategies, which of course Springer Nature employs, but increasing visibility should be an ongoing point in mind for authors, EIC, as well as publishing teams. So networking, we all know, be that finding a job or in any field, networking is critical, very important. Similarly, even in publishing, networking definitely helps in attracting submission. So if you are part of a good network, or if your university affiliation offers very good networking, then that will lead into developing well-established network that can generate more citations. Submitting your article to preprints that are becoming now so popular, something archive has been in existence for so many years, bioarchive, there are more and more coming into the picture. So submitting your preprint, the author created version to this archive, preprint archive, will increase interest, which will generate more citations. We all know use of social media in constantly creating awareness and keeping your target audience informed that you have published something that is of interest will definitely be required and will make a positive impact. Some studies have already shown that offering articles open access could make a difference. But there are so many journals, including Nature and New England Journal of Medicine. They are not open access. However, they have, as you know, very high impact factor, and they are considered the leaders in the field. So, but open access articles could make a difference. Please note that all these points, you can't just focus on one, you have to use all of them at the same time. So publishing guidelines papers in your journals will increase the visibility, and guidelines, position papers, working papers attract a lot of citations. Sharing your data with your peers will also make a difference. As I said, data sharing policy is becoming one of the requirements. ANI services are looking for it. So sharing your data will make a difference. Some studies have indicated more than like a single author. If the article is written by multiple authors, it will generate more citation. This is kind of tied up with the network point that I previously made. So team authored articles are supposed to get more citations. Of course, from EIC's publishing team perspective, make sure that your journal is publishing quality papers. And from author's perspective, make sure that you are writing quality papers. Now, these are some points specifically for authors. So number one is, starting with your name. Make sure that you are using a unique and consistent name. When I say unique, it means Smith J. There could be like thousands of Smith J. So you want to make it unique by adding your middle initial. I have come across some names that is just one name. And it is, one of the Indian authors, a couple of Indian authors, they just use their first name. It makes indexing job extremely difficult if you do not provide a unique name. So make sure that you are using a unique name consistently throughout your academic career, so that all citations are accrued under the same name, which is now that point is tied up with ORCID ID. ORCID ID or similar type of unique ID will help bring all different variations in your name together so that it could be tracked. And it is extremely important that you have a comprehensive profile under one name, and ORCID ID will definitely make a big difference. More and more ANI services eventually make that a mandatory requirement. It is not a mandatory requirement at this point. Okay, affiliation address. Make sure that you are using full address for the affiliation. It is not abbreviated. There is no confusion with the affiliation, because as I said, all this information is gathered for analysis by various services. So it has to be consistent. Continuing tips for authors: title abstract, it include keywords in the title of article that should be repeated in the abstract also, because as I already indicated, and this is where the search engine optimization will come into picture, because this is where the content has to be easily discovered through all these machines, computers, and it is completely algorithm based. So make sure that you are using keywords in your title and abstract. And those keywords are kind of accepted terminologies in your subject area. Many ANI services are making it requirement that the abstract should be standardized. So keep that in mind. No, avoid using long titles that use symbols or abbreviation. Do not do that, because symbols are not identifiable through the search engine. So if you try to put, one example is Web of Science, if you try to put the symbol, you will get zero retrieval. So make sure that you do not use those types of symbols in your title, just because it will not be easily discoverable. Keywords, we already talked about using the keyword, but make sure that you are using the common keywords used in your subject area. Medical subject heading mesh is one of the prime examples. Okay, institutional repositories. Make sure that you are submitting your manuscript to your institutional repository and it is made available through the institutional repository. Institutional repositories are becoming extremely critical. And each institution may be offering a different platform, but at least the entire work published by that institution is in a central place, which will make a big difference with indexing as well as with accruing more citations. Add lay summaries to the abstract. This is not like applicable for all subject areas. This is more applicable for medicine. It definitely helps because, as you know, in the field of medicine, there are patients and family members and caregivers who are not necessarily clinically equipped to understand the content, but they are always interested in the lay summaries. And that could generate a lot of interest, including media. So make sure that you are, especially for medicine, Again, it is not a mandatory requirement, but it could help. Publish on multidisciplinary topics so that your article is picked up not just by one discipline, but it could be applicable and it could be indexed in multiple databases. So it has a better chance of getting discovered and getting cited by different audiences. And make sure your publishing profile is up to date. Whatever you are using, if you are not using it, may be a good idea to create your publishing profile. Yeah, make sure you are publishing in the journals that are considered important in the subject. As you know, Springer-Nature is one of the leading publishers. So Springer-Nature is one of the avenues through which you should be publishing your content. Present your work at conferences. Visibility is very critical. Marketing, visibility, making everybody aware what you have written and how they can get that content. It's very, very critical. So use social media, different, society outlets, news outlets, bloggers, make everybody aware what you have written. So that it is being communicated and shared with all different types of audiences. So this is, I know I've taken like more time. I'm really sorry that there is so much to cover. And that's the main reason. Now this is the time for Q&A. And yeah, let's open it up for question answers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sonal. I know there's a lot to cover, but you were really great, and thanks for covering it in such a detail. Especially, you talked about Scoopers, Web of Science, and the last part, and you had so many tips for our attendees. I'm pretty sure they all must have benefited. You have received the first set, and don't worry about the time. We have planned to drop the platform demonstration for this time, and we will be conducting it next time. So you have time till 6:15 to cover your questions.
Okay, great.
We have
That's
made
good
up
to
for
know.
the
Thank you for
lost
your
time.
patience. But as I said, there is so much to cover. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to do, justice, at least for the basic information. Wanted to make sure that the audience participants got the main points. So thank you, Alpana, and the audience for your patience. Let's go ahead with questions.
Yeah, so you must have received an email from my colleague. You can check that. Meanwhile, I'll take the presenter rights back from you.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So let's go through the question. Number one question is the ANI service provided by SN chargeable? No, there is no charge involved. The ANI services, ANI team and the services that we provide is an integral part of Springer-Nature as the publisher. If you are publishing with Springer-Nature journals, this is the value-added service you automatically get. So there are no charges to the author, to the EIC or the journal. It is completely covered. Okay. The next question is, what is metadata and how does it work? Okay. So the metadata is from author's perspective. You wrote an article. So that is in Word or whatever format you submitted your manuscript. It got peer reviewed, it got selected, it's going to get published in one of Springer-Nature journals. You see the HTML version on the journal website. However, because as I said, the entire abstracting indexing process is automated, that content needs to be in a format that is machine readable. And in order to make that machine readable, that file, what you submitted as a Word document, gets converted into tags. So each part, each sentence in your document gets converted into tags, and those are known as meta tags. And it is absolute requirement that the meta tags are being created, and these are based on the technical requirement of each ANI service, so that the content is digested, ingested by their computers. So PubMed, as I said, there is no human being sitting there. initial content is ingested by what is known as PubMed loader, which is the PubMed system, and they are going to check for the metadata. If we provide a wrong ISSN number, that PubMed machine is going to reject, saying that sorry, we are not matching this ISSN number. So we have to then look into it and correct the problem. So that is mainly the metadata. Moving on to number third question. Is there any difference between the impact factor of SCI and SCIE? So I already explained there is no SCI anymore. It is only SCIE. So the impact factors are always given to the journals that are selected for SCIE. So there is no impact factor for SCIE.
Hi,
Next question.
Sonal,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Just one request. If you can call out the attendee name also who has raised the question, it will be nice.
Okay, sure. I'm so sorry. So the first question
Okay.
about the A9 service and the charges was by Mr. Raj. I already answered that. Question number 2 came from Mr. Shrikant, and he was the one who was asking about metadata and how it works. Question number 3 came from Dr. Rajesh, and he's talking about SCI and SCIE. And I already explained there is no longer any product offered by Web of Science that is known as SCI. It is only SCIE, and the journal selected for SCIE will end up getting an impact factor. The next question is from Miss Shaili, and she's asking, if a journal is indexed as Web of Science, does it automatically mean that it is science citation indexed? Or should I look for specific mention of SCI in the abstracting and indexing list to assure whether the journal I'm using is SCI indexed or not? This is an excellent question. All questions are very important. But yeah, I would recommend, okay, so the answer is first part of the question. If a journal is indexed as Web of Science, does it automatically mean that it is Science Citation Index? No. I explained there are multiple products on Web of Science core collection. One of the databases is Emerging Sources Citation Index. So if your journal has been selected for Emerging Sources Citation Index, it is not going to get an impact factor. So if you are interested in submitting your manuscript to a journal that is getting an impact factor, then you must be looking in the abstracting and indexing list for Science Citation Index Expanded, if it is a STEM journal, or Social Science Citation Index if it is Humanities or Social Sciences journal. These are the only databases that give the impact factor. So please keep in mind, if you want to submit your journal to the one that is getting an impact factor, it has to be Science Citation Index Expanded or Social Science Citation Index. The next question is from Ms. Tara. Which indexing is having high impact value quality worldwide? So gold standard until now, so far as the impact factor as a metric is concerned, is Web of Science, Science Citation Index, Social Science Citation Index. Scopus is becoming very competitive, and their site score is that's equally competitive. However, these are the two main ones. So you can get the journal indexed which is indexed in both of this. So it may be a good idea, if you want a wider coverage, to select those journals that are indexed in Scopus as well as Science Citation Index Expanded or Social Science Citation Index. This way you are ensuring that your article is going to be discoverable through the best of the platform. Now, I talked about Medline. Although Medline doesn't give importance to the citation activity, it is considered highly prestigious, and it is very difficult to get your content included in Medline, which has, as I said, the reputation is great. So these are the three databases that have wide reach and wide significance. These are Science Citation Index, Scopus, and Medline. Coming to Dr. Prabhu's question, what are the requirements for indexing in DOAJ? So DOAJ, the number one requirement is that the content should be open access. The next one is that the journal must have published at least 5 to 7 articles for them to start the evaluation process. Then they have very specific requirement whether the journal is partnering with digital archives such as Sherpa, Romeo, whether the journal website is clearly giving the APC, article processing charges, for the journal, the content that is published. So DOAJ has a list 35 questions that are required. And if you are interested, Mr. Prabhu, I can share those requirements through Alpana with you to give you a clear idea as to what are specific DOAJ requirements. Moving on to Ms. Gyaneshwari's question, what is the difference between peer review and blind peer review? So peer review is the process, and there are different types of peer review. The peer review process could be single blind, double blind, open, or main editor handled. So single blind peer review is where only one party is aware of the identity of the author, which is usually the case with the reviewer. So the reviewer knows who the author is, but the author doesn't know who the reviewer is. In double blind peer review, neither the reviewer nor the author are aware of who is, like, author doesn't know who's evaluating his or her content, and the reviewer doesn't know who the author is. So when they get the manuscript, the name is completely, affiliation and name are stripped. So they just make the decision based on the content. Double blind peer review is most preferred by ANI services, especially by Medline, because they value double blind peer review process the most. There are open peer review processes also, whereby, you know, every comment made, everybody knows the identity of the other person. Reviewers know who the authors know who the reviewers are, and each comment, the review comment, is publicly shared. That is known as open peer review. And the one which is mainly for book series is main editor handled peer review process, where you do not have the editorial board, but there is some kind of peer review that is taking place. So these are the major differences of the peer review processes. So moving on to Dr. Rajesh's question, though conference proceeding had a side score, they don't have an impact factor. Why? That's a very good question. So conference proceeding has a side score because Scopus handles conference proceedings and book series like journals. So they expect the conference proceedings to be published or meeting all the requirements that they ask the journal for evaluation. And once the conference proceeding is selected for Scopus, that title will automatically get a site score. However, this is not applicable in Web of Science. In Web of Science, they have different databases. The database for conference proceedings is known as Conference Proceedings Citation Index. So the conference proceedings selected for Conference Proceedings Citation Index do not get an impact factor. The citations included in the conference proceeding citation index get counted towards the impact factor of the journals that are already getting an impact factor. However, conference proceedings do not get an impact factor, and this is the decision made by Clarivate Analytics, Web of Science, and they are, at least in the near future, not planning to make the changes. So this is the big difference between Scopus and Web of Science. And that's why it is very critical for the content, especially if it is a series, if it has an ISSN number, to include it in Scopus. And your publishing teams are fully aware of it, and they are constantly working to make sure that the titles, journals, conference proceedings, book series are included in Scopus. Moving on to the next question by Ms. Ganga. What is the method used for citation rate calculation? So citation rate calculation, you mean for impact factor or site score? Because both have different method. For impact factor, it is in the numerator, it is citations in the current year. So for 2019 JCR, they take into consideration 2018 citations to the articles published in 2017 and 18 divided by citable items published in 17 and 18. This is the formula for impact factor. The formula for site score is different, and they have recently changed. In June 2020, site score changed their formula of calculating site score, and based on the new method, they take in the numerator, they take citations for 3 years into consideration, and they have selected certain document types for which they are going to consider those citations. So editorials, commentaries, letters will not be taken into consideration anymore with the revised method of site score. So the site score method is citations for 3 years for a citable item divided by citable item for 3 years. So they have made it more transparent and consistent. I have the detailed method, including comparative analysis of site score versus impact factor, that I have shared with the publishing teams. You may want to approach the publishing team to get that information. Okay, moving on to the next one, Ms. Palash Datta. What is the importance of research visibility? How it can be done? Importance of research visibility is tremendous, because if your the work that you have done and the effort that you have put in, if it is not discovered, if nobody finds out, it is like, as we say it in Hindi, जंगल में मोर नाचा किसने देखा, right? So it has to be discovered, it has to be recognized, it has to be read, and for that you have to make sure that you are using all different avenues and platforms, and creating the visibility so that the audiences, target audiences, are being aware. I'll give you an example. When an article is published in New England Journal of Medicine, all major media, at least here in the US, will be talking about one or two articles published on a weekly basis in the leading journals. That gives tremendous visibility to the journal and, of course, the articles. Now, all journals may not have the budget or the resources to cover, because it is so expensive. So the best part, we already discussed about all different ways of increasing the visibility. So by networking, by, adding the link to your signature. So when you send the email messages out, people are finding out about your latest articles. Make sure your author profiles are comprehensive, up to date, starting with Google Scholar. Make sure you are adding all the latest articles into all your profile. Make sure that you are using, the society news. You are partnering with society and they are aware that you have published something that of interest. Social media, which is a powerful, very powerful tool, and we are currently seeing in India in the current days, as well as globally, that mass movement can be started with social media. Similarly, you can use a social media platform to make your content visible. So there are so many different possibilities and avenues to make sure that your content is getting full visibility. So it is discovered, people read it. If they read it, they are going to cite it. Okay, so I have covered 10 questions. I'm checking for more question, and I see
Yes,
that
you have another set, Sonal. That's 4
yeah,
questions, and a set third is also coming, if you don't mind.
not at all, not at all. So now these questions 11, 12, 13, 14, I do not have the names, so I won't be able to
We are
say the name. So
we are sorry for that.
yeah, so okay, so question number 11 is, which indexation database is the best in terms of quality of evaluation. So quality of evaluation, because each database has its own way of evaluation and they consider their evaluation is the best. There is no one, I would say Medline and impact factor databases. They are very thorough and very systematic, and they pay attention to lot of different data and many points before they make a selection. Scopus is also pretty good. However, compared to Web of Science, impact factor databases, and Medline, it is a bit easier to get included in Scopus. That doesn't diminish the quality. I'm just saying, the thorough analysis and evaluation that is done by the reviewers at Web of Science for the impact factor databases and by the reviewers at Medline, that's kind of the toughest, most difficult. Okay. The next question is, what is your opinion about Nature Index? Of course, Nature Index is one of the best. So my opinion, I'm all in favor of it. However, it has a different, it is about, it has a different focus. So it's not truly an indexing service the way what we discussed in today's session. So it's kind of beyond my remit. So I may not be able to go into detail about the Nature Index, but I highly value it and I think it's very important. Okay, the next question is, which is better, SCI or Scopus? So as I said, now they have head-to-head competition. So I would consider both Science Citation Index Expanded and Scopus to be valuable. However, the main decision is kind of made by the funding agencies. As of now, many of the ranking services in different countries and the funding agencies still value Science Citation Index or the database that provide impact factor to be comparatively more valuable. From my perspective, I think Scopus is giving a tough competition. It is getting the recognition, it is getting the acceptance, it is becoming pretty popular in some countries like China, Russia, Italy. It is a requirement for the faculty, for authors in academia to get their content included in Scopus for getting a job, tenure, promotion. So Scopus is, from my perspective, equally important. However, from funding agencies, impact factor is still considered the gold standard. Next question is the impact factor of Scopus and Web of Science different? Yes, site score and impact factor are different. They are having different methodology in deriving at it, which is becoming pretty similar, but there are still differences. So impact factor is offered by Web of Science. It is their trademark, their copyrighted product metric, and site score is offered by Scopus, and the methods are different. So you will see some journals having higher impact factor but lower site score, and this is because of many different reasons, starting with the coverage. Scopus has more number of journals in their database compared to Web of Science. So naturally, the result, the metric is going to differ. But there are other differences also. So I answered those questions. Let's go to the next set of questions. Okay. The question is from Miss Anita. Can we create our unique author name, which is different from the one which we have been keeping throughout our academic records? The answer is yes. You can certainly keep your unique author name, which happens, especially when names are changed in some countries, after marriage, which happens. But then in that case, if you want to make sure that your entire work is being brought together, something like ORCID ID could be the best way of making sure that all your work under different names are brought together, so that all these indexing services will be able to offer one way. Sorry, Alpana, go ahead. You have a question?
No, that was, I think, some disturbance from students. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Carry on.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So the unique author name could be brought under one profile. If you use something like ORCID ID, there are other IDs also, but ORCID ID is globally accepted, because if you just depend on Scopus author ID, then it is limited only to Scopus. So make sure whatever unique identifying number or system that you select, it is globally acceptable by all ANI services. Moving on to the next question, Mr. Chandra, where data shared to the Springer is stored and how to get this data by the researcher. So we have the data bases. I'll have to get back with specific, like if you are asking about specific databases, I'm not quite sure where exactly it is stored. If your data is part of an article, then of course it is stored under the system that we use for those journals. So if your article got published in which you have published the data, then that is being kind of archived or saved in the system that we use for the journal content. But data shared as a database, I'm not quite sure about the details, and maybe Alpana can answer that question at a later date by finding out from some other teams. But I'm not sure about any database. And I know there has to be a database because we have a separate team dealing with data policies and data that's being used and reused. But I cannot give that answer because I do not have the up-to-date information. Okay, moving on to the next question, Dr. Suman. Is affiliation important? What about lifelong researchers? Affiliations are important. Lifelong researcher. So these are not, I do not see this as mutually exclusive, right? As a lifelong researcher, you can continue to write and publish even if you are not affiliated, because you have established and created your own profile and reputation, so that nobody can take that away. However, affiliations do play a very important role. Now, I'm answering this from the perspective of an author, okay, not from the perspective of editorial board, because that has a completely different connotation. But affiliations do make a difference, and we have seen that, which may be fortunate or unfortunate, but authors coming from certain very well established and recognized reputable institution, kind of, their content may be considered differently. I'm not a reviewer, so I don't know, but affiliations do play an important role. That again doesn't diminish the value of a lifelong researcher. So, and Google Scholar and those types of platforms are the best way for lifelong researchers to make sure that if you have published independently something, make sure you are keeping your author profile up to date and adding it. So it's going to add value to it. The next question is from Dr. Savita. How to find the journals of our area of interest if it is an emerging field, blockchain? So journals, like, there are so many directories, and you can do like a basic search in the internet platforms like Google Scholar or Microsoft Academic, these search engine. Or even if you go to Scopus and if you just type in blockchain, and if you limit your search to source titles, you will be able to find out what are the leading journals publishing on this topic. Now, it may happen that you may not find a dedicated journal yet on an emerging topic. However, this topic may already be have been discussed in the leading, multidisciplinary journals like PLOS or Nature, or there are so many examples. And these journals may have already been discussed in those, this topic may have been discussed in those journals. But one way to identify what are the leading journals publishing on a specific topic is to do a search, a keyword search in either Web of Science or Scopus, and then limit your search to the source titles. That is going to give you the list with the number of publications within that journal. That will give you a good idea. Of course, then you have to check whether how well indexed that journal is. Moving on to the next question, Miss Angeline. When SN Applied Sciences will get impact factor? Very good question. We have been trying very hard. As you saw already, some of the A9 services have very strict requirement of waiting for 2 years before they can start the evaluation process. Scopus is one of them. The journal is already in emerging sources citation index, which means the content is getting indexed and discovered through Web of Science platform. Once the journal has good citation activity, genuine citation activity without self-citation, and when the journal moves into Q1 or Q2, which means in top 50 percentile of the subject category, it is going to be considered for impact factor database and will be evaluated for impact factor. Moving on to the next question, Mr. Suraj Kumar. Is there a mandatory for claiming ethical clearance certificate before submitting a research paper in a reputed journal? No, I don't think so. There is no requirement. The ethics process or the peer review process is done by the peer reviewers, EIC and editorial board members, and they need to pay attention to the author and ethics related issues. So I'm not aware of it, but again, I'm not the best person to answer your question, Dr. Suraj Kumar. Maybe one of the publishing teams will be able to provide this because they are connected with the peer reviewers and EIC, and they will be able to give you this answer. But ethics as an overall policy is being evaluated by individual indexing service. I'm not sure at an author level the process that is followed by the publishing team. Moving on to the next question by Dr. Sandesh. Is cross-referencing necessary to get more citation? So citations, cross-referencing, yes, you are. I don't quite understand what do you mean by cross-referencing. So if the citations, if you have talked about that particular content from a particular article, you are going to cite that in your reference list. Similarly, your content is going to be used by someone else. So I'm not quite sure about what exactly do you mean by cross-referencing, because I just want to make sure that you are not talking about citation stacking, right? Because the cross-referencing could lead into citation stacking, and that's a big issue, and the journal could get suppressed, but it's a whole different area. So if you can provide more clarification, I'll be able to provide more accurate answer. Mr. Nero, what is the difference between self-citation and total citation? So total citations are the citations received for a particular article or for a particular journal. Out of those citations, some citations are citing that own journal. So say, for example, if I'm publishing in Nature, if my article got published in Nature, and in my reference list, out of 200 references, if I have 150 references from Nature itself, that means I'm self-citing the journal. Beyond certain threshold, this self-citation is considered unhealthy, and it is not liked by the indexing services. And Web of Science will suppress the journal if the self-citation rate goes above certain threshold. In 2020, Clarivate has changed their parameters and policy regarding self-citation, and they have implemented stricter requirement. So previously, they used to consider across the entire science citation index and a certain level threshold above that was considered bad. For example, above say 45%. That's not the case from 2020 onwards. Now, Clarivate is considering each category exclusively. And within that subject category, they are seeing which journals are outliers and they have very high self-citation rate. So even if that a particular journal has overall 25% of self-citation rate, it could get suppressed because it is skewing the entire subject category. So the policy from Clarivate has been changed. So to answer your question, total citations are all citations for the journal, and self-citations are those citations out of total citations that cite journal, that same journal again. So those are self-citations. Moving on to the next question, Mr. Vellier, how can one increase impact factor through publication? So we already talked about, all these different points that you may want to take into consideration to increase the citation activity, which will eventually result in increasing the impact factor. So it starts at an author level, manuscript level, to accrue more citation. And we already talked about all those different points, starting with selecting the right topic, making sure that you have the keywords in the title and abstract, offering simple comprehensive title, avoiding certain things. Those were all the points that we already discussed that will help at an author level and a journal level to increase the impact factor. And the last question is from Mr. Surya. What is necessary for a good paper, impact factor or citation or indexing? So these are all different topics that was covered in the presentation, the complete presentation, right? So good paper impact factor, I already answered this question. The previous one was similar question. So all the points in section 8 that I discussed, ways to increase the impact from journal level and from author level, all those points need to be taken into consideration at simultaneously, not just one point, but all points need to be considered in increasing the impact factor. The citation, again, it starts at a manuscript level. If you increase more citations at a manuscript level, eventually that's going to benefit the journal, eventually, which is going to increase the impact factor. So far as indexing is concerned, citations and impact factor are not necessarily required for all indexing services. As I said, there are so many discovery and indexing services that will not pay attention to citations, increasing citation or accrual of citation. Some services like Medline, they do not care for citations. However, they do care for, what is the ethical process, what is the ethics process implemented by the journal, or what is the peer review process, what type of articles are published, because Medline will give a lot of importance to original studies or reviews also, if they are systematic analysis or meta-analysis. Medline doesn't like the narrative reviews. So the indexing process will differ from service to service, and not all services will give importance to citations. There are many subject specific ANI services, although they are smaller, but they are very specific. As I said, mathematical reviews, ZB Math, Econ Lit, transportation database, astrophysics database, they do not necessarily care so much about citations, but they care for the content because they are subject specific ANI services. And they want to make sure that if you are publishing on those topics, they are including your content in their databases. So citation, impact factor, and indexing are not all the same thing. They're all kind of separate. And in some cases, indexing and it may not be, it is interdependent, but they could be mutually exclusive also. So these are all the questions that I have answered, and I don't see any more questions. Let me go back. Yeah. So these were the last. This was the last batch of question that I answered.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sonal. And it's 6:35. We are 20 minutes past our stipulated time, but that is okay. And I think that was a good call to not do the platforms today and do it in the next week because there were very intelligent questions that our attendees had asked. And special thanks to you, Sonal, for answering all of them so religiously. I am pretty sure that the attendees would have benefited, and we are receiving very positive comments in the chat box also. So thank you once again. Your morning is actually starting now, Sonal. It's 9:15 there, right?
It is 9:05. Yes, my morning is starting, and I want to thank you, Alpana, and the team in India, and Dr. Lal, and all the attendees, participants for asking such interesting questions and giving me the opportunity to present and talk about ANI services. And I hope everybody benefited in some way, like on a smaller or bigger scale with this presentation. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
You're most welcome, Sonal. The pleasure is all ours, really. And just quickly, because our attendees are leaving now, I would like to give certain information to them. As I mentioned in the beginning, this was the second webinar in the 3 webinar series. We have another one which is totally on the ethics. The title is Publishing Ethics in Biomedicine and Life Sciences Research. So I have already pasted the link of this webinar in the chat box. I request you all to please, if you are interested, please copy and paste and you can register for yourself. The session will be taken by Dr. Maria Kovalchuk. She is from the Research Integrity team and she's based in London. And she deals with all the ethics issues also at Springer-Nature. It is on 16th September from 2:30 to 4:30 p.m. And we will also do the platform demonstration of nature.com, which we could not do today because of the paucity of time. And just 2-3 more announcements. A recording of this webinar will be shared with all of you tomorrow around the same time right now, like I think by 6:30. That will come an automatic mail from the tool. We will be providing e-certificates to all the attendees, and though I've written it here 1 week, but we plan to do it as soon as possible. After this webinar ends and you will close the window, there will be a survey link that will appear, and please spare 2-3 minutes of your time to let us know how you felt about this session, the conduct, concept, and the content which was delivered in this webinar. So thank you so much. And this is my email ID. If you have any queries, and Sonal also mentioned in between, if you have any more answers to your questions, you can always write an email to this ID, alpana.sagwal@springernature.com. Now I would like to invite Ms. Priyanka from DeLCON. She's here with us. And Priyanka, you can unmute yourself and deliver the vote of thanks.
Hello.
Yeah, Priyanka, we can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Priyanka, carry on.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, but there is a little net. Your sound is breaking.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Hello. Okay. Behalf of NBRC, DeLCON Consortium, and Dr. Didi Lal, I, Ms. Priyanka Yogi, would like to present a vote of thanks for today's webinar. I this webinar will be very much useful as our speaker, Ms. Sonal Shukla, have covered all about value of abstracting and indexing, importance of contents discovered through artificial intelligence, and discovery services, major services for indexing, application and evaluation process for PubMed, Web of Science and Scopus, which will be useful and helpful for those who would like to writing their paper, and mostly professionals and students will be benefited with this webinar jointly organized by DeLCON, NBRC, and Springer-Nature. First, I thank you to our speaker, Ms. Sonal Shukla, for excellent presentation and speech. My gratitude to Springer-Nature for collaboration. thanks to all participants, members of Springer, especially Mr. Bikash Kumar, Director Springer-Nature, and Ms. Alpana Sagwal, faculty members, scientists, researchers, DeLCON nodal officers of all 35 DeLCON member organizations, library professionals, students for attending this successful webinar. Our next webinar is on 16 September 2020, which we will inform you through email and social media. Again, thank you all for participation in this webinar, and thank you to Dr. Didi Lal sir for the opportunity to present a vote of thanks to this webinar. Now, we are closing the session.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Well, Dr. Didi Lal, are you there with us?
Yes,
Hello?
yes.
Would you
Yes.
like to say some closing remarks?
Yes, thank you so much for organizing this webinar. I must thank you to the Ms. Sonal Shukla for excellent presentation. And thank you, Alpana. So now we are closing. So just give a thanks and we close this one.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, all of you. Special thanks to all the attendees. And I still see a big number of you all still staying put with us. I'm really hoping that you have benefited from this webinar and you already have my email ID. If there is any question in your mind, please do not hesitate to send an email to us. We'll try our best to answer your queries. And we will again like to see you on the 16th, where we will talk about publishing ethics. That webinar is totally dedicated to ethics in publishing. So it will be nice if we have you again on 16th. Though we have sent a chat message with the link, but we will also be sending emails to all of you because few of you have left this webinar because we took a little more time. Thank you once again. Have a good night and see you. Thank you, Sonal, for being there, and you also have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you, Didi Lal sir, and thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Faculties. Bye-bye.